Okay, next.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Richard Wilson. I'm chair of the Connecticut SAC and a professor of social science in the UConn Law School in Hartford. And we've heard all morning a strong assertion of the correlation or even causation relationship between family structure on the one hand and educational attainment on the other. And I'd like to ask you to consider the evidence to the contrary. As Professor Patterson mentioned this morning, in Western Europe, there has been a strong increase in the children born out of marriage, and yet a corresponding increase in educational attainment. So math scores in the United Kingdom, Netherlands, Denmark have been going up, and marriage rates have been going down. This suggests to me that family structure is not the only factor, and not the most important factor, perhaps. And we should look at the things around supporting the family that goes on in the Western European social model. For instance, there are very good public schools. There is universal health care. There are unemployment benefits. And there are a range of government programs which provide security and stability for parents, be they single parents or not, which support the family. Now, unless you're going to look at those kinds of programs, and I would argue it's always cheaper to educate than incarcerate, but unless you're going to actually spend the money to support families and provide a supportive context for families, then you're missing a lot of the picture. And I would suggest that simply to pass moral comment on family structures, well, it's cheap, it's free in fact. Passing moral comment is free, it doesn't cost us anything. If you're not going to spend the money on providing security for families and stability, it comes across as sanctimonious moralizing.
Okay, jump in there.
Thank you. Great statement. I just have a question, just related to that, because I've heard that argument, multiple times, and I guess for me, what is the responsibility of men? Because to me, you can say, okay, we can, but at the end of the day, because we're not in Europe, we're in the United States, right? And the reality is we're not in Europe, we're in the United States, and there are a whole bunch of other things that go along with that in terms of the American experience that make this very different. But my bigger thing I guess my question back is, what is, because I think men, how now shall we live? What's my responsibility? If I get a woman pregnant, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to make sure that the government structure is there to take care of my child? I mean, what am I really supposed to do? Because I think that at the end of the day, I mean, that's the other piece. And not what am I supposed to do if I live in Europe, because they figure it out. I'm talking about what am I supposed to do if I live here today? And that's really, from my perspective, like when I'm hearing these stats about these young boys getting killed in the community, I'm almost in tears here. This is the real world, not academic world, not this, the real world. Tomorrow, a boy needs to hear something from someone that says, how am I supposed to live as a man now? And from my perspective, that's really what all this is about. You know, all the stats. That's the question. And I'm dealing with boys today, and they're asking me that question. And I can't give them what's happening in Europe. They want to know what's happening in Trenton.
Okay, Roland.
I'm sorry, that was probably not a question.
Harry.
If I could.
Okay,
That's
Roland.
just practical every day. You're sitting in front of somebody, you got to tell them, this is how you should live.
Roland, we can carry on this particular line of the conversation a little later. Professor Holzer?
I partly agree and partly disagree with the comment. I think the truth is, and again, just not to get into the moralizing piece, cohabitation in Europe tends to be a much more stable setup. So cohabiting fathers and moms still are very good fathers and moms, and we haven't figured out how to do that. Cohabitation in the United States is very unstable. And if we can make our cohabitation as stable here as in Europe, I'd say that's fine. You know, we don't need a priest or a rabbi to bless it. But in this country, our cohabitation is not like that. So that makes the comparison with Europe. You know, at the end of the day, this is about fatherhood, not about marriage per se. And those men are stable fathers, and here they're not. So that's one problem. The other problem, I think, and I agree that I think those social supports are very important, but the difficulty of trying to take the European model and impose it in the United States is, number one, those social structures are supported by very high tax rates in the United States. And I don't know about you, I don't see the current political system in the United States as one where people are willing to embrace European-level tax rates to create that kind of a safety net. And number two, the European model, they have some difficulties on the employment side. In some, not all, but some of those countries, the tendency of people to drop out of the labor market or to remain unemployed for very long has been very high. So even though I like some of the supports provided, it's not very good on the employment incentive front. So the European model has its minuses as well.
Okay, folks, I regret to inform you that we are cutting into lunch. I'm going to cut it off here, unfortunately. I apologize. So let's take a break for lunch.
Thank you. Just a little bit.
Unbelievable.
Just one thing. So I say marriage is... No, I know, but look,